Hi there. My name is Susan Greutman. I run Sunchoke Farms in South Bend, Indiana. We are a true urban farm, so we grow just under an acre, but it's spread out through 4 urban lots. So all of our lots are within a 2-block radius, so we're actually farming on lots that once had houses on them that were, for whatever reason, were demolished, and the lots sat vacant for a while, and now we're utilizing those lots for urban farming. So in our little under an acre, we actually grow for 2 different farmers markets and a small CSA. And part of our production is also indoors, where we don't need green space to grow, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about growing microgreens. Now, microgreens are basically little baby vegetables. I'll show you this one right here. This is a sunflower microgreen, and then it has the 2 leaves. We call these the cotyledons. As the plant grows, it will put out its true leaves. But microgreens are eaten in this baby form stage when they just have the cotyledons. And then sometimes with some microgreens, you might have 1 set of true leaves, not for sunflower shoots. Microgreens are super nutritious, sometimes having up to 40 times the nutritional value of their full-grown counterpart. And so in the resource packet, on the first page, there is actually a chart that shows you all of the different nutrients that are available through microgreens. And they're really great because it can be nutrient dense yet grown in a small space. So this is great for urban farms, for classrooms, or just in the wintertime when you can't grow as much outside. Now I want to clarify that microgreens are not sprouts. Sprouts are grown in water, and it's the whole root with the plant. And so sprouts are a completely different category of vegetables than microgreens, and we're not advocating for growing sprouts. We're advocating for growing the microgreen, which you actually cut so that the root is no longer attached to it. And they're dry, whereas sprouts are often very moist and are more likely to harbor bacteria, and that's something that we do not want. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to grow microgreens. You can grow microgreens hydroponically and in soil. When you're doing hydroponic microgreens, it might look something more like this. This is coconut fiber. You can also grow on hemp fiber or an array of other materials that they're offering for hydroponic production right now. This just basically means it's seed and water. There's usually no nutrients involved, no soil, just the seeds and then the stored up nutrients from the seeds to produce the microgreens. This is something that you might notice. I have this spacer here. If you ever decide to do hydroponic microgreens, you want to make sure that you use some sort of spacer between the medium that you're using and your tray because the roots need oxygen. And if it's not going to get very much oxygen in there. So that's one way of growing microgreens is hydroponically. And I do mention in your resource packet City Hydro, which is a place where you can get all the equipment and actually the knowledge too. It's open source on how they grow hydroponic microgreens. But for today, we're going to grow microgreens in soil because that's how our farm does it, and a lot of farms also choose to do it that way. Growing in soil, we have a couple different options. A lot of people like to use 10-20 trays. It's called a 10-20 tray because it's 10 inches across and 20 inches down. And then just as we talked about the roots needing oxygen, you often want to put a tray inside your 10-20 tray. So this is like a half-size 10-20 tray, and it has holes in it so that the roots can come down and get their oxygen. And I'm going to show you what that looks like right here. This is a full 10-20 tray of microgreens, and if I lift this up, you can see all the roots underneath. The roots are reaching for the water, so you don't even need that much water in the bottom because the roots are reaching for it and grabbing the water, and the roots that are exposed are getting the oxygen out of the air at the same time. So that's one option for growing in soil. The way that we prefer to do it on our farm is we prefer to use these colorful 5x5 trays. You can fit 8 5x5 trays in a 10-20, and this is how we do it. The reason that we choose to use the 5x5s is because we don't want to cut and package our microgreens. We want to give someone a living product. So when someone gets microgreens from us, it looks like this. Okay, it still has the roots coming out of the bottom, but they get the whole thing, roots and all, and they can cut it for themselves. Some other equipment that you might need from growing microgreens is you're going to want seed starting soil, obviously, and seeds. And then I gave you a recommendation in your resource packet for 2 places to get seeds. We get most of our seeds from True Leaf, which is in bulk, True Leaf Market. Always remember, and I'll tell you now, you need to keep track of where your seeds come from. So I highly recommend, if you're repurposing a container, which is great to seal up the seeds, take the label and tape it on the side, because then way you always know your batch number and lot number. So if there's a problem with the seeds, you can contact the company. Or, worst of all, if somebody gets sick because there's a problem with the seeds, you then have that to refer to and you know where your seeds came from. Other things that you're going to want to have around, you're going to want to have hydrogen peroxide. We like to keep ours in here because we actually buy a big food grade hydrogen peroxide container because you do need to sanitize your seeds after you plant them. And then it's also helpful throughout the growing process if there's just to sanitize the seeds as you go. It just is very helpful to the growing, and I'll show you that in a minute. There are a lot of ways to water your microgreens. We love using this because it is so much easier than a spray bottle like this. This you have to pump and pump and pump and pump, and this you can just hold down and spray. And we'll demonstrate that when we seed. Other equipment that you're going to need. It is great if you have a light setup like this that you can put your trays onto under the light. This is not necessary in a classroom if you're on a budget. Honestly, you could take a table like the one we have here and just do 1 string of lights and then just grow underneath that space and expand when you need to. If you saw a big microgreen operation, they're going to have a whole wall of lights, okay? And the same thing with this. You don't always want to waste germination space on a rack like this, so you might use, like for us, we use a baker's rack. So if you go into a bakery and you see a big rack on wheels that you can roll around, we actually put our trays in there during germination. And that is helpful for both saving space and making sure our light space is only used for sprouting microgreens. All right, before we show you how we do the microgreens, I'll let you know my top recommendations for seeds for getting started. There's a lot of different things that would grow decent microgreens, but easy things to get you started would be things like radish, which is right here, just so you know what it looks like. Okay, radish. And then pea shoots are also an easy one to get started. Sunflower shoots here. And then basically broccoli or anything in the brassica family. So today I have broccoli, red cabbage, red mustard, but all those small brassica seeds are great for getting started. And then something a little bit more difficult, but super tasty and kind of fun would be leek. And those aren't too bad. For growing, it's a little bit more difficult than the pea shoots and the brassicas, but really good and not, I'd say, like a next step. You could probably do that one too. All right, so this is my special helper today, and we're going to show you how we grow microgreens on our farm. So we actually measure out. We have measuring cups we specifically use for our farm, and each 5x5 tray takes 1 cup of soil. And so while Zita does that, I'll tell you some other things. And she'll put 1 cup in each one. You can stand if you need to. If you are doing a narrow tray like this, this is also completely good and possible. You're just going to want to fill it about halfway with soil. It's about 3 cups of soil, just approximately. And then when you're seeding that, it's about 100 milliliters of seeds to sprinkle over it to get a nice dense planting like the radish we grew there. So like a scant half a cup. So if you didn't want to measure to the 100 milliliters, you could do just less than a half a cup, and it would get sprinkled over the top in that way. It's also often helpful, whether you're doing the 10-20 trays or the 5x5s, to just tamper down your soil just a little bit before you get started. So we often just use another tray. There are specialty tampers that you could make out of wood or something like that, but it's simple enough just to go through and push them down. We have been farming and growing microgreens since 2018, and even though we've changed the way we done it a few times, from hydroponic to 10-20 trays to now the 5x5s, I found that microgreens aren't that picky. They're actually pretty simple and pretty easygoing. As long as you spread out your seeds and you're nice to them and keep them moist, they're pretty happy. So in doing the 5x5 trays, we just use 1 tablespoon. And so these are radish seeds that we have here today. And we'll just be taking 1 level tablespoon of radish seeds and sprinkling them over the soil pretty evenly. And like, that's it. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. Second graders can do it, you know, and they can become very good at it over time. It's a little bit trickier in the 10-20s to spread them out evenly and get to all the corners and sides. It's a little bit easier in the 5x5s. Now, just as a note of reference, the 1 tablespoon works for all smaller seeds, so radish and brassicas. If you are doing pea shoots, you're going to need 2 tablespoons because the seeds are bigger, so you're getting fewer seeds per tablespoon. And sunflower seeds you will also need 2 or even up to 3 tablespoons. Those are more difficult to measure because those are the 2 types of seeds that you need to soak overnight first before you plant. So pea shoots and sunflower shoots get soaked overnight, and then you can measure out and go in. But the measurement is for dry seeds. And then once they absorb all that water, they're going to soak up a little bit. So for us over time, it's been kind of an eyeball and estimate based on how many dry seeds are taking up how much space. But that would be a great exercise for you with your students or on your own to measure that out. Just to soak 1 tablespoon of dry seeds and see how much it is in the fully moisturized seeds. So once the seeds are all seeded, this is where we're going to come through and we're just going to sanitize the seeds and dirt really quick. This means if there are anything that you don't want that was maybe in those seeds in transit or somehow, it just gives a quick sanitization. Sometimes, especially with seeds like cilantro or something, we'll see a little bit of fizzing. Cilantro is often a really dirty seed. So we might see some fizzing with the hydrogen peroxide in that. Radish and other brassicas like this, usually not. So after we've seeded it, we've sanitized it, now we're going to water it. We're going to water in 2 ways. We're going to tap water to keep the seeds moist. And you'll continue to tap water every day during germination. We'll bottom water, which we'll fill from a larger pitcher. We'll bottom water under here to keep the soil moist. Now, when I say germination, if you're a farmer, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a teacher, you might not. Germination is the time that it takes for the plants to emerge from the seeds. Microgreens germinate in darkness. And so there's a couple options. We actually use these covers and we cover our microgreens for germination like this so they stay dark. Some people, especially using the 10-20 trays, will choose to stack trays. So they might stack on top like this. Now, there is a reason I choose not to stack trays. I have stacked trays before, and every single time you stack a tray on a tray, whether it's 10-20 on 10-20 or 5x5 on top of 5x5 on top of 5x5 like that, yes, it creates a situation where it's dark. However, you're always taking a chance when your seeds germinate that you're going to have this, and the seeds are going to stick. And then you might end up with holes in your tray of microgreens. And I've found over time it just works better just to cover it up and then go ahead and move it to your rack for germination. So then here, this has the tray from my baker's rack on it. We have what microgreens would look like after a while. And these are some different types. So this is the radish that Zita just sowed, and you can see that it has now germinated and it's starting to come up to the top. This is really close to the point where we're ready to put it under the lights and be set with it. We want it to get to at least the top and a little bit farther. And even here, if you're doing this, you want it to go beyond the top and basically it's going to be pushing your foam cover off. So we had the foam cover and we see that it's starting to push the foam cover off, and then we're like, okay, it's fully germinated, and it's ready to go under the lights. You can see that different microgreens are going to take different amounts of time for germination. And it's really going to vary. Like radish and broccoli are really fast, whereas you can see my little pea shoots here, they're just starting to send out their shoots. And the same with the sunflower. They're just starting to send out their shoots. But for a lot of these brassicas, like the purple broccoli here, I mean, it's usually about 8 to 10 days total, and after about 5 days, they're going to be close to this. It will obviously depend upon your temperature and things like that and the space that they're growing. If it's really cold, it's going to take longer. If it's hotter, then you really need to make sure you watch for airflow and we don't have mold issues. But every day when they're in germination, you're going to be coming through and watering them and checking the bottom to make sure there's a little bit of water down there for them, and then basically putting them back in germination until they're tall enough to go under the lights. And then after some time under the lights, they're eventually going to look like this. And so this is the radish like she just sowed, and the pea shoots and the mustard. You can see they're all different sizes, but here they are ready to go. And if you're using 5x5s, they're ready to sell just like this. That takes away a lot of the health department's concerns over like wash water and things like that. Really, the highest source of contamination on a farm is often the water that we use to either irrigate or to wash our vegetables. On the city, we have city water, so that's not as much of a concern. We're not dealing with having to test wells or things like that. But that's what the farm inspector told me. She's like, the less you can wash, the better, she tells me. But if for some reason you're doing a 10-20, we'll go over to the 10-20 really quick, because obviously you can't just give your customers a big tray of microgreens. Unless they're a microgreen super fan and they really want all of that, but not likely, not likely. So you've got a couple options here. The most common is actually just to harvest and package the microgreens. I really hate using plastic clamshells, and this is why we do no longer do microgreens this way in the 10-20. We now do the little 5x5s, which we actually return. We do a $1 deposit on them. They get returned to the farm, and then we sanitize and reuse them. Just a note on sanitization, when you are sanitizing your trays, make sure that you are using a hot, soapy bleach water and then rinsing thoroughly and letting dry thoroughly. But because these are firm, they really hold up well to being washed all the time, whereas a flimsy clamshell does not hold up to being washed. It's much more difficult to sanitize, and almost any health department is going to really frown upon you washing and reusing clamshells. So this is the way to go. These and the heavy-duty trays are from Bootstrap Farmer, and I have that in the resource packet as well where you can get those. But let's say you are going to do this and you're going to harvest. Now, you can use a regular knife. You can also use scissors. And so if you have students doing this, you're obviously going to want to use the scissor option. And I'll try to do it here on camera. You almost have to kind of just grab them gently. And then from grabbing them gently, just cut across. And it's like mowing a lawn. And then you have a big pile of microgreens, and in they go. Most clamshells that you would be using are going to fit about 2 ounces of microgreens. And they'll go in like that, and then you'll have that a little bit fuller than this, but basically like that, ready to go for sale or for counting out if you're measurement or whatever the case is. I'm just checking my notes quick. So one thing I did want to talk to you about is mold versus root hairs. And I will show you on these. See, we did such a good job on these, I can't really show you so well. So as the microgreens are developing, the little seeds are sending out their roots, and there are little like micro roots, these little baby roots that almost look kind of fuzzy because the roots have all these little bits coming out. It'd actually be really cool to look at under a microscope, but sometimes some people who are growing microgreens will think, oh no, it's fuzzy, I have mold. But that's not the case. If you have mold on your microgreens, it's going to look more like spider webs, and less like fuzz. Oftentimes, if you see that little fuzzy bit, what you want to do is you can do two things. You can shoot it with a spray of water, and if it goes away, because the roots have absorbed the water, then you know that it's roots. You can also take your hydrogen peroxide and you can spray it with hydrogen peroxide, and if it fizzes up, it's probably mold. So just as a way of checking, because so many people have thrown away perfectly good trays of microgreens because they saw the little fuzzy bits, there were actually root hairs and not mold. But if you start to see just a little bit of mold, don't think like that everything is done and over. Just go ahead and spray it with your hydrogen peroxide and wait a little while. Sometimes you will kill the mold and the microgreens will still grow and you'll be okay. Other times, if it's really hot and humid, the mold will just completely take over. So just give it a chance, give it a try, and don't be afraid of just getting in there and trying again. All right, so just to review briefly how we do the microgreens, you want to take your growing medium and fill your trays evenly. Remember, you're going to pre-soak the peas and the sunflowers, but not the other types of seeds. You want to scatter the seeds in the top of the medium as evenly as possible. Cover the trays to provide a blackout period. Check them daily, water them daily using hydrogen peroxide if necessary. You're going to uncover about day 4 or 5, depending upon how tall they've gotten at that point. And then you will water them and put them under the lights. And then water lightly every day. And it really depends upon your situation. So in these sorts of trays, at this point when they start to get big, you're just bottom watering. And the same for those under the lights, bottom watering. In the resource packet, if you look under Bootstrap Farmer, there is this really cool automated watering rack. If you have the finances for that, it will water all your microgreens for you twice a day. So once you get them under the lights, it's just a set it and forget it sort of situation. And then you want to harvest around day 8 to 15, depending upon the seed and how much it's come out and matured by then. Do not allow your sunflowers to grow to the true leaf stage. The true leaves on sunflowers actually start to get a little fuzzy and very bitter, yet in the cotyloidin stage, they're sweet and crunchy. So watch that. And then once you've harvested it, you can store it in bags in the fridge. We like to use mason jars, or if you're packaging, just leave them here in the packages. And they're usually good, fresh from about a week in the fridge, like that. All right, so since this is for both the classroom and small farm, just a little bit of microgreen math that you might want to try out with your students. When you're buying seeds, you're buying your seeds by the pound, yet we're measuring out by the tablespoon. So it would be great to find out how many tablespoons 1 pound of seeds equals. So 1 pound of seeds equals how many tablespoons? And then we can find out from there the price that we're paying per tablespoon of seeds, knowing how much the seeds for 1 container costs. You do the same thing with your soil. So 1 bag of soil is equal to how many cups? And therefore my price per cup of soil is whatever it is. And then you're knowing everything that's going into your 1 container. At that point, you can actually cut and weigh out your microgreens, and then you can do the average. So let's practice averages. What is the average number of ounces that we're getting per 5x5 tray? What is the cost per ounce? And then you repeat that for various seeds that you're growing. We, as farmers, sell all of our 5x5 trays for the same price. Now, obviously, not all the seeds cost the same price, but we've averaged that out and figured, okay, this is close enough. We're still getting a good return on our investment, and it's a fair price. And then it's easier for us and for our consumers than having a different price for each variety. Also, you can brainstorm different costs to consider with your students. So what is the cost of the time and the labor involved? How about the electricity to run the lights, water usage or packaging, sanitizer, and the time that it takes to clean and get those trays ready? You can also, like a more advanced topic would be distributing the initial equipment costs over a period of time. Because obviously you're not going to pass on the cost of this tray to the first person who this tray goes to. We've had these now for 3 years, and this is what they look like after 3 years. Practically brand new. We've got 1 chipped corner. The pink ones have been fading a little bit. But this is 3 years of use back and forth to consumers, and they're still in great shape. So that would be something, a whole nother subject to talk about, distributing equipment costs over a period of time. So I think that's all that I have for you today about how to grow microgreens in your small farm and classroom. So what other questions do you have?
Do you have any organizational tips or advice for labeling, keeping track of what's what?
Oh, yes, definitely. So we always label all of our trays with some bright yellow tape and a marker. Your label should always include the date that you've sown the microgreens, the type of microgreen it is, and then if you are sourcing seeds from multiple companies, you should mark what company that seed has also come from, just in case you have more than one bin. Say I have a bin of seeds from Johnny's and a bin of seeds from True Leaf, I would need to make sure I know which one went into that tray. So yes, always do that. And bright yellow or another bright color is fabulous.
And is that per 5 by 5?
No, it's actually per full tray.
10 by 20?
It's per 10 by 20. So we don't actually do mixed trays like this on the farm. This was just for demonstration purposes. So I would do a whole tray of broccoli or a whole tray of pea shoots or whatnot. And because their life cycle is changing every week, I don't have things, I'm not fluctuating a whole bunch. I'm not going to have a whole bunch of peas from different places on my rack at the same time, so I'll be able to know where it comes from.
Did you tell us what soil or what medium you're?
So we use an organic potting mix, and that has varied over the years depending upon what's locally available. So sometimes it's organic pro mix, and sometimes we'll go down to the farm store in Goshen, and sometimes they have it, and sometimes they have another organic potting soil mix, and that's what we would use.
So it's a heavier mix.
It's actually the same thing that we use to start our seedlings on the farm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be considered a seed starting mix then?
It would be considered a seed starting
Okay.
mix, yes.
Do you have to, since you're putting that foam over the top after you seed them and it's dark, do you have to, or have you run into issues with having to warm them from the bottom, or is that an issue with getting them to germinate with no light?
It's actually not. They germinate very happily with no light. It has to do with the room temperature.
Okay.
So in the winter, we sometimes will have to use a little bit of supplemental heat, but usually we're between 60 to 70 degrees. I think 67, 68 is the optimal for a lot of these to germinate. But yeah, as long as the ambient temperature is fine, it's not a problem.
Okay. Cool.
And I would say another use of our hydrogen peroxide is we do sanitize our foam tops regularly as we're doing. Whenever we water, we'll spray off the top of it again just in case, and every time we open them up, basically.
Is that pure hydrogen peroxide or do you dilute it?
No, this is a 3% hydrogen peroxide, so yeah, we do have to dilute it because when we get the big gallon jug of the food grade hydrogen peroxide, I believe it's 12%. Yeah, and so then we have to dilute it to 3%, and then just make sure your bottles are black because it is light sensitive.
Since you've started this and you're doing other crops outside, have you found that this is gaining popularity and is becoming more worth your while, or how does it compare to your other vegetables in production for consumers?
So it's definitely seasonal. So right now we're not growing or selling as many microgreens because we have a very diverse vegetable farm, and we have about 30 other types of vegetables that we have going right now. And so when we have our CSA and people come to pick up their things, they're not as interested in the microgreens now because there's tomatoes and there's cucumbers and there's peppers and there's all these great summer things that they're only going to get for a little bit of time. Whereas the microgreens are all the time, and especially in the spring, if I haven't seen them all winter, they're super excited and they really want microgreens because they haven't had anything hardly fresh and local all winter long. And then even through that time, through the spring, through the winter, they're more popular then. And then it kind of dips a little bit in the summer when everything else comes out, and then it will come back again. That said, we do have people who are on a subscription who just love them, and they get a tray every week. And we do deliver that to people's houses for them at this time as a service to them. And so it depends on the person, but overall, we see less popularity in the summer.
When someone buys your microgreens, what advice do you give them about washing before eating?
So I would say like it's really up to every single person. However, we need to tell them like this has not been washed, and then they have the responsibility to wash their own produce before eating it. And I do encourage them to not leave it in the container that long. Some people like to. They like to leave it out on their kitchen counter, but especially in the summertime when it's hot, it could become a little fruit fly magnet, just like any other plant. And so I often encourage them to harvest it right away and get it into a jar in the fridge. As you can see, like they're very clean because they were basically just grown in water, but there is soil below there. And so you do want to wash it before you eat it.
I have a question about the hydrogen peroxide spray. Does that detract from the nutrients at all? Do you know?
No, it doesn't detract from the nutrients. Basically, it basically becomes water. So it's H2O3, but it dissipates into the air basically. So it only is active for a short period of time before it's completely dissipated into the water and the extra oxygen molecule. And so it deters from it no more than water does.
Adam, I had a question about lighting. You mentioned like in a classroom you can just start with like a string of lights. What are they, grow lights?
So it would be a single grow light. I'm looking to see. So kind of like this one actually, which I can't completely pull out.
It just has one bulb in it.
Yeah, just it could be a single bulb, it could be a double bulb, but they make them that with a little stand, and then you could just have the little stand on a table with like 2 trays underneath, and it would be a really inexpensive startup operation. And you don't even have to buy like the nice Bootstrap Farmer trays. I will say we bought our first trays from them in 2018 and we're still using them now. So it's totally worth it as opposed to the cheap flimsy trays that might last you 1 or 2 seasons before they start getting holes in the corners. But you could still get the cheap $1 a piece trays just to get you started.
I was gonna ask, are other herbs like basil, like are those options for microgreens? And do you have to get, like I've seen in the store microgreen seeds. Are you ordering a microgreen seed or are you ordering a brassica mix
So there's
that you use?
really no difference in seeds between regular seeds and microgreen seeds. It's just that you're buying a bulk amount. And they say microgreens on them because they're going to send you like a 5-pound bag or a 1-pound bag because that's their intended use. But literally, like you could take it and put it out in the garden. So we grow red Russian kale microgreens. And after we have cut the microgreens, we'll have like this bit of seeds and dirt left over. And sometimes there's some ungerminated seeds in there or still the plants. And that goes to our compost pile. And this year we had actually a bunch of red Russian kale in our backyard that somehow made it through the compost pile and was just growing. And we're like, okay, great. So now we have red Russian kale, just the same as if I had bought more expensive seeds from Johnny's and starred them in my little 128 cell trays and put it out in the garden. Same exact plant. And yes, you can grow herbs. So basil microgreens are really popular. They're also on that higher difficulty level. And dill is wonderful, and even carrots are great. Trying to think, some of the herbs that are harder to germinate, like lavender or thyme or things like that, don't make great microgreens because it takes so long in germination. The longer it sits in germination, the greater the risk of a problem developing. And so anything that goes really quick, the 8 to 15 day cycle, is what you're going to have the best luck with.
What are some of your favorite ways of using these in the kitchen? And like, particularly if you're working with students, like what kind of, other than like just a salad?
So if I was with students, I would actually probably just get some little paper cups and put a little bit in each cup just to taste and taste the flavor of them, and just maybe even compare and contrast, like how do radishes taste different than broccoli, taste different than all of these, and then really bring in some descriptive words, have them practice their adjectives and how to describe this flavor. So yeah, comparing, describing the mustard, all of that. There's so many different options for that. And then for my customers, we often talk about like all the things that you can put them on. So like mustard tastes literally like mustard, and it's great with like bratwurst or hamburgers that you're getting all the nutrition of like green plants, but yet it tastes like it belongs there because it just tastes like mustard. And radishes are great frying for salads or sandwiches. Pea shoots can even be lightly sauteed or added at the top of a stir fry at the end or something like that. And then the leek, being an onion garlic flavor, is awesome with eggs and potatoes or anywhere you'd really want like that sort of flavor. So we often talk about the flavor profile of things and what sort of foods they'd go well with.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.